What causes some individuals to move through disruption with a sense of deep, intentional transformation, while others feel as if they're circling the same pain for months or even years? In many cases, I believe the difference is not the size of the disruption, but the way we choose to meet the truth it brings. My friends, when we refuse to face what this moment is actually doing in us and to us, whether out of fear, shame, exhaustion, or a desire to protect the people we love, guess what? We quietly cut ourselves off from the very clarity, wisdom, and direction that could carry us forward into the next chapter of our lives. Welcome back to Achieve Intentional Transformation podcast. I am your host, Dr. Leonie H. Mattison. Wherever you're listening right now, whether you are in your car, in the office, or maybe you're out on a walk or at home or between emails, I want to honor your decision to be present to yourself and to what your life or leadership may be asking of you in this moment. So thank you so much for the gift of your time, your presence, and your contributions. I appreciate you. As always, it is a beautiful thing to be on top of the earth, and I feel blessed today. And I am sending much expansive blessings towards you as well. This is season 1 of the Achieve Intentional Transformation podcast, and together we're walking through 6 stitches of the T.H.R.E.A.D thread system. Each one a practice for living and leading with intention in these disruptive times. And as I've shared in prior episodes, we are on a journey, and I have launched a 7-part series to help you weave your life back together after disruption. And so in episode 1, I invited you to name a disruption that you're currently navigating. Notice where it lives in your body and choose an image from nature to describe your current season. Beginning to see that disruption is not only an event, but it's an atmosphere, and it's an atmosphere that you can learn to navigate. Today, in episode 2, I'd like us to begin with the first stitch, and that is to think deeply. Together, we're going to explore what happens, when we do not think deeply, what it can look like to think deeply in real time, and also explore some practices to help you to steady your thoughts and your decisions in the midst of change. As always, I'm going to invite you to take some deep breaths. Breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, and exhale for 4. So let's do that together if it's safe for you to do so. Just to pause for a moment and just take some really long, deep breaths. Okay, let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Release it. 1, 2, 3, 4. One more time. Doesn't that feel good? I always love to take deep breaths. I want to start this section with a lost scene that many of you will recognize in your own story. Imagine walking into a meeting, or maybe an appointment, or an important conversation, feeling hopeful about the future. You're in a familiar room with someone you respect, ready to discuss next steps, or maybe an upcoming season of work, or a treatment plan, or a way forward in a relationship. Your mind is already exploring possibilities. You're excited. You're ready. You're prepared. Your agenda, your notes, or your note-taking device, you're ready. You're ready to go. Then, almost unnoticed at first, the atmosphere in the room begins to change. The conversation shifts from plans and possibilities to limitations, constraints, and difficult realities. Then the words come that none of us ever want to hear. And for you, it might be something like, your position is being eliminated, or the test confirmed a serious diagnosis, or I do not see a way forward for us to continue, or I'm sorry, we did everything we could. Different sentences, same impact. On the outside, you do what you've been trained to do as a responsible adult, and for many of you as leaders, you remain composed, you sit upright, you take a slow, steady breath, you listen, you ask clarifying questions, and even thank the other person for being honest. That's what we see on the outside. That's what we see on the outside, right? So from the outside, it appears as if you are managing the moment, because that's what we've been trained to do. Let's flip that tapestry over. Inside, a different kind of meeting is happening though. Because you see, my friends, on the inside, a stillness settles that doesn't feel peace. It's as if the floor beneath you has quietly shifted and you're focused on staying upright. Meanwhile, the room, the organization, the clinic, or the relationship scene continues as usual. And for many of you, maybe your chest tightens or your eyes starts to burn with tears you're not ready to let go. Or maybe for you, a wave of uncertainty moves through your body and touches far more than your schedule. It reaches your sense of identity, safety, belonging, and calling. If this feels uncomfortably familiar, know that you're not alone. Many of us have sat in rooms like this and we walked out with questions that no one in that space could answer or could see. Maybe for you later, alone in the car, in the parking lot, or on a side street, you do something you might have once hurried past. You stop the car, you turn off the engine, you place both hands on the steering wheel, or maybe in your lap, or if you're like me, you put your hand on your head, or maybe on your shoulders or on your face, and you take a long, deliberate breath and let your body reveal the truth of what you just heard, of what you've just experienced. And it could be that your role or responsibility would rather hide, but you're willing to face the truth. And so maybe your eyes fill and the tears are flowing from you as you recall the conversation in your mind, and questions rise quickly in succession. And maybe you're asking yourself, did I miss something? Could I have prevented this? What does this mean for my future, for the people who depend on me, my children, for the life I thought I was building? You ask those questions and they rise quickly. And underneath those questions, another voice begins to surface, quieter but steadier, sounding like the language of your own peace and the integrity you value. It reminds you that you have given what you could in this season, that a particular chapter has come to its end, and that however unwanted this loss feels, a process is unfolding that now calls for your trust as much as your effort. So you take another slow breath that reaches all the way down into your stomach. And this time, instead of pushing the experience aside, you name it. And you may say something like, my heart feels heavy. I feel deeply disappointed and uncertain. I am concerned about what comes next. You remind yourself that what happened in that room describes a role, a report, or a relationship, or a season, but not the sum total of who you are as a person, as a leader, or as a child of God. You make a quiet internal commitment that before the day ends, you will sit with what has happened. You will not rush past it. You will not ignore it. You will not fight or complain about it, but you're going to sit with it. And maybe for you, you choose to write about it. Or you bring it before God in prayer. Or you ask a more personal question, and that is who you intend to be in light of this moment, rather than allowing this moment to define who you are. This is a simple picture of what thinking deeply can look like in a real time. It's not dramatic. When we think deeply, it is not about performance. It is a grounded, honest, and fully aware decision where you choose to create just enough space between the event and your identity for wisdom and perspective to begin to speak through you and to you and even for you. And in that space, you are no longer only the person something happened to. Guess what, my friends? You become the person who is choosing how to respond. That scene that I just shared with you is it's not theory for me. Oh no. What I just shared with you, there was a day when loss came in waves for me, one after another. And within a few hours, losing a role I had invested in myself. Losing a role I had invested myself in. I received a painful news about someone I loved and started feeling deeply lost. I was almost lost in the losses that were happening in succession, one after the other. I was feeling deep inside that my life was being reshaped without my consent. And it affected my body, my relationships, and my sense of direction. Yes, it was confusing and at times very much overwhelming. But none of those losses, my friends, ultimately defined my identity or my future. I didn't allow that. I made an intentional decision in that moment. And I chose often, even while I was trembling, even while I was crying, even while my heart was shaky. I made a decision to stay present to my inner life rather than abandon it. And I achieved this by taking 4 deliberate steps, the same 4 we're about to explore together today. They didn't erase the pain. They didn't change the situation that I just experienced. No, but they kept me from being controlled by it and helped me move toward intentional transformation. As we go on, I invite you to think about your own disruption and stay with me here because we're going to go step by step until you can see more clearly who you are, what the season is showing you, and what it's calling you to become. My friends, the disruption may alter this chapter of your life, but it does not have to have the authority to define your identity or determine your future. Even in the moment you are navigating right now, you have the power to retain the power to choose to think deeply without a polished speech and without an instant plan. I'm inviting you to think deeply, because think deeply calls for something quieter and far more powerful. It's a deliberate willingness to stay present to your inner life, to trust that you're not walking through this alone, and to take clear first steps towards intentional transformation, rather than settling into a life that remains permanently shaped by the impact of loss, disappointment, or despair. You have that power to choose to think deeply, my friends. And I want to remind you of that power so you never give your power away to disruption, challenges, or transitions. You hold on to that power. You retain the power to choose to think deeply. Now, let's imagine a different response, right? We're going to go the opposite direction to what I just described. Now we're going to look at what it really looks like not to think deeply. I want you to imagine a different response, one that many of us know well. So the meeting takes place, right? The same news is delivered, but there is no pause. And so for many of us, the body reacts and we immediately translate the experience into self-blame or a quiet panic. Maybe for you, your mind begins to race with questions and accusations. So we leave the room already drafting a story that says, I should have seen this coming. Oh, I must not be enough. I need to fix this immediately. So we go into what? Over-functioning, over-explaining, and even over-committing ourselves into burnout. We replay every detail of the conversation, but in a negative way. Not to understand it, but to prove that we failed. We act without reflection, trying to outrun the discomfort we feel. And that is what not thinking deeply often looks like in a season of crisis. The same disruption arrives, but instead of becoming a catalyst for clarity, it becomes more evidence for an old story about our worth. To understand why these two paths feel so different, I believe it's helpful to briefly examine what happens in the brain when our lives are disrupted. And I've taken a lot of time to think this through, to do my research around this, because I needed to understand what was going on inside of me first. And I needed to really practice, right? Not for perfection, but so that I could continue to grow in this area. And so what I found is that neuroscience reminds us that inside the brain, something very specific is occurring when we experience disruption. As a difficult event unfolds, the amygdala, which is the brain's alarm center, activates and sends signals throughout our body. The heart may begin to race, breathing may become more shallow, and the stomach may even tighten. This entire cascade, my friends, is the nervous system's attempt to keep us safe. When that alarm remains activated for an extended period, however, it becomes more difficult to access the regions of the brain that's responsible for clear thinking, a pattern recognition, and decision making aligned with our values. Now, the prefrontal cortex, which is the area that supports reflection, evaluation, and conscious choice, guess what? It becomes less available under the strain of prolonged threat. And we find ourselves reacting rather than responding, replaying events rather than reflecting on them, and simply getting through the day rather than slowing down, slowly remaining, and even reimagining what might be possible. At the same time, another network in the brain known as the default mode network begins organizing our experiences into a story about who we are. And it draws from, and really begins to draw on our past, our imagined future, our roles, and our perceived failures and successes. The default mode network creates a continuous narrative of me that can feel persuasive, but it's not always reliable. And that narrative is often a collage of memories, assumptions, inherited messages, and even internalized fears. It may offer moments of insight, but it doesn't fully capture the truth of our identity or our potential. Intentional transformation, that decision, the power of being intentional, often begins the moment we pause long enough to notice the story the brain is telling and to listen for what our actual life is saying underneath all of it. And for some individuals, it begins to change not because your circumstances become easier, but because we make a conscious choice to listen to ourselves with gentleness, honesty, compassion, and consistency, even when the process is uncomfortable, even when it asks them and all of us to release familiar identities, and even when the next step has not come clearly into view. And that is the power of being intentional. It is a choice. Transformation is not a prize reserved for people with more resources. No, it's not a prize for people who have more time or more visible strength. Transformation grows out of sustained, truthful attention to the body, to the present moment, to our mind, to all of who we are, and to what is quietly trying to emerge through those disruptions. You may be listening to this and quietly thinking about your own situation. Perhaps you're navigating a job loss, or a health diagnosis, or a relationship that has ended, or a season in which something you trusted or someone you trusted is no longer, or that something has been removed. You may be feeling as though you're stuck. You're replaying conversations, even second-guessing decisions, and maybe you're carrying questions that feel too heavy to stay out of your airwave, or it's so heavy that you can't even say it out loud. In this moment right now, I invite you to focus on that specific disruption you brought into this series when you chose to join this journey toward intentional transformation. Bring it. This is the moment to bring that disruption right here. We're going to put it in front of us today. That disruption is the knot in the thread of your life that you can feel even when your calendar is full and your to-do list is complete, but it is not your entire tapestry. I'd like to say that again for someone who's thinking, oh, my life is over. This is the end of me. No, my friends, it is a knot in the thread of your life. It is not the entire tapestry. You may be asking yourself how you can turn this ending into an opening, how you can turn this uncertainty into a sense of direction, or how you can turn this season of loss into a different way of living and leading. And I'm here to let you know, I've done it so many times. I've been knocked down so many times. And what I'm sharing with you today are the steps that I have taken to achieve intentional transformation, no matter what the disruption that hit my life tapestry looks like. I also want to add something that I think is very important. In many leadership environments, I know we're trained to lead primarily from persona and ego. And persona is a part of us that manages the image, the role, and the expectation in the room. And the ego is a structure that works hard to protect that image and to keep us feeling in control. Please understand, both have a purpose in the room. The difficulty arises when the culture around us reward only the persona that performs and the ego that wins. And guess what, my friends? It leaves almost no room for the deeper life of the psyche. And over time, the culture can create a vacuum that quietly invites even the most experienced executive to neglect their inner life in order to maintain a polished outer one. Throughout this journey, you will hear me use words like ego, persona, shadow, soul, and psyche. And when I use those words, especially when I use the word soul and psyche, I'm referring to the core of your life, the place where your thoughts, feelings, imagination, desires, memories, your values, and the sense of calling converge. It is a part of you that seeks meaning. And for those of us who are on a faith journey, it is a part of us that reaches for God and recognizes when something is aligned and when something is not. When this inner life is ignored in favor of constant performance, leaders become highly effective on paper and quietly depleted or fractured on the inside. That is why your question matters. So if you're wondering how to turn this disruption into a different way of living, leading, loving, and learning, it is not a sign that you're failing. No, it is a sign that your soul, your psyche, your deepest self is refusing to go numb. And guess what? It is ready to grow. Intentional transformation does not begin with a perfect strategy, document, or a perfect public declaration. Oh no. Intentional transformation begins with a set of disciplined moves that you repeat until they change the pattern of your responses. So again, bring that situation, that disruption, that problem, that challenge, whatever it is that's keeping you up at night. If you're in the kitchen, if you're at your desk, put it right in front of you. Maybe write it down. Write it down on a piece of paper. Job loss, health diagnosis, a divorce, a loved one who've passed on, whatever it is, write it down. Put it in front of you. Take a look at it. It is not the whole scope of your tapestry. This is one, and it may be multiple situations that you're going through, but it is still not your entire tapestry. It is several knots in the tapestry, yes. But I don't want you to give up on yourself. I don't want you to think that it is time to throw in the towel and give up on who you are and why you were created to be in the earth at this time in history. We're not giving up on ourselves. We're going to take disciplined moves that you repeat until they change the pattern, until that knot is out, or until you cut it away. Because sometimes we have to cut. We're going to talk about releasing in one of the steps. Sometimes we have to cut that knot off. But for now, all I want us to do in this episode, right? Acknowledge what it is that you're going through right now. And we're going to take 4 concrete steps to think deeply. I'm going to walk you through how you can begin that process using the tools in episode 2 worksheet. So there is a link in the show notes that you can download to work through these 4 practices on your own. Number 1. Are you ready? Do we need to take another deep breath? All right, let's take another deep breath. Okay. Breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Release it. First, name what is happening and where it lives in your body. When we think deeply, we start by slowing down our system enough to think clearly. For you may need to take 3 measured breaths, just like we just did a few minutes ago. Inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth, allowing your exhale to be slightly longer than your inhale. If it's safe to do so and you've downloaded the worksheet, go ahead and open episode 2 worksheet and go to the section where you name your situation and use the feelings wheel today. We're going to bring in another tool. The feelings wheel is a tool that helps you move from vague labels to a more precise emotional language. You see, many of us have been taught that children ought to be heard, to be seen and not to be heard. And so we were never taught how to really express our feelings. And so we suppress them. We shove them in the unconscious, and it stays there until we go through disruptive situations. And then most often than none, they emerge in very disruptive and destructive ways. And we don't want that to happen. And so the feelings wheel will help you to actually move from vague labels about how you're feeling to a more precise emotional language. So in clear, direct words, I invite you to write what has changed and how it's affecting you. So let me give you an example. For me, what I wrote was, I am in a season where my role has ended and my future feels uncertain. And that is true. I wrote that I feel this most in my chest and my stomach and in the way my thoughts race at night. So I name it. I'm honest with how I'm feeling. I feel uncertain. At one point I remember writing, I feel sad. I feel disappointed. I feel taken advantage of. I felt betrayed. Write your feelings. So there is a feelings wheel. You can pick as many feelings as you need to. So use the feelings wheel to move beyond general words, right? Like stressed or upset. And I want you to identify more specific emotions such as disappointed, if you're feeling worried, or even if you're grieved. Naming is not a soft exercise. Naming your feelings, no, it's not a soft exercise. When we name our feelings, it is the first act of leadership over your internal life. And when we name our feelings, it turns a scattered reaction into information that you can work with. And as I said, this is not therapy. This is not mental health therapy. We're going to talk about enlisting allies in the future step. Right now, I'm inviting you to name what is happening, name how you're feeling, and if you're able to identify where it lives in your body. So my uncertainty was living in my chest at the time. It was showing up in my stomach and in a way how I was thinking at night, in the way my thoughts race at night. Name what is happening. So go ahead, grab the feelings wheel, and start naming how you're feeling. Right here, so we have, this is what I'm going through. Now we're going to name what is happening, how are you feeling, where it lives in your body. Go ahead. And if it's safe to do so, if you're in a safe place, we're able to work on this, go ahead and do so. Or you could come back to this particular exercise and work through it. I remember I have the feelings wheel right here in front of me before I go on. But I remember the first time my therapist had me work on this. I have to be honest with you, I did not realize there were so many words that I could use to describe my feelings. And if you go to the feelings wheel, in the middle of it, you'll see words like fearful, angry, disgusted, sad, happy, surprised, bad. And then the feelings keep going out into, I think, 1, 2, or 3 or 4 more circles. And it gives more words. So when we talk about feeling disappointed or disgusted, it goes to disapproving. I feel awful. I feel embarrassed. I feel appalled. I feel nauseated. I feel horrified. right? To be able to describe how we're feeling. When we talk about feeling happy, using words such as optimistic, I feel playful, I feel content. That's how I'm feeling today. But in those moments, I was not feeling that. Let me tell you that right now. Anyway, let's move on to number 2. Second, I invite you to separate the facts of what has happened from the story you're telling about your worth. So turn to the section of the worksheet that guides you to list the facts in one column and your internal story in another. So in the facts column, I want you to record what you know to be objectively true about the event. And in the story column, write the fears and assumptions it has triggered for you. You might write, which is what I wrote, so you don't have to use my words. I wrote, my position was eliminated as part of, I'm not going to go into details. And in the facts column, I wrote, I'm afraid this means I am no longer valuable or wanted. Again, that was how I was feeling then. That is not how I'm feeling today, but I was very honest. Placing the facts and fears side by side does not minimize the impact of what happened, but it prevents your worth from being swallowed up by a single painful moment. So go ahead and you're going to separate the facts of what really happened from the story, not the story you're telling yourself. I want you to just focus on the facts. Separate the facts of what has happened from the story you're telling about your worth. I don't want you to attack your worth. Just for this moment, work on those 2 columns. Third, identify which part of your life this disruption is impacting most. I'm going to bring in another resource here. We're going to use the Wheel of Life. So turn to the page in your worksheet, and there you will find the Wheel of Life page. And what I love about this Wheel of Life, again, when I worked with my coach and I've worked with my therapist on this as well, and I refer to these very often. And as I said before, we're starting with you as a leader first. And then when we move to working with teams, organization, communities, and even our nation, you'll see how this builds. Because again, you cannot give what you don't have. The Wheel of Life is a self-assessment tool. And this has been developed many years by Paul Mayer, I think. And it helps us to visualize a life balance, even though I don't always believe we can live a balanced life per se. There's no such thing as work-life balance for leaders, unfortunately, but there are ways in which that we can live a balanced life. So the Wheel of Life, it helps us to do a brief scan to see where this disruption is landing with the most force, whether it's in your career, your finances, your health, your relationships, personal growth, spiritual life, or another domain. As I said earlier, so often when we're going through a disruptive moment, we tend to say, oh, my entire life is going down the drain. Oh, my entire tapestry is torn. And most often than none, that really isn't the truth. Sometimes it's, if there's a job loss, it impacts your finances, your career, and your health. Sometimes it might be that those are the 3 domains that, it's landing with the most force. Now, this is not about pretending everything is fine. It is about understanding the scope of the impact and distinguishing between what has actually changed and the conclusions you're drawing about yourself. When you see that a disruption is hitting 2 or 3 areas hard, but not every area of your life, guess what, my friends? You begin to see that your decisions can be informed by reality rather than driven only by anxiety. And this is often the point which transformation begins to diverge from automatic reaction. I love this exercise. I do it very often. I actually like to do this at the end of the year or the beginning of a new year to really do an assessment of my own life. So I look at all these domains, and sometimes I had added new domains, but for the most part, the common life areas are career, work, and school. Number 2, finances or your money. Number 3, health, which is your physical well-being. Number 4, family and friends, which is like the relationships domain. Romance, which is love. Personal growth, learning, self-knowledge. Then there is fun and recreation, which is enjoyment. Then there's physical environment, which can be your home, and then spiritual inner life, right? So take a scan, do a brief scan to see where this disruption is landing with the most force. Fourth, remember who you are and who you're becoming and who you choose to become. And so you can choose one concrete action that aligns with that identity rather than with your fear. So go to the values section. We're going to bring in another resource here, and that's a values assessment. So go to the values and the future self section of your worksheet, or you can find values assessment online. There are many values assessment online that you can explore to do this exercise. If you want to have something that's more automated that you can send to yourself, I encourage you to check out different tools that are available online. But however, in the workbook, you'll see the values assessment. And there I invite you to list 3 to 5 core values that you want to govern your life and leadership in this season. So no matter the disruption that you're going through, what I'm inviting you to do here is to list 3 to 5 core values that you want to govern your life and leadership. For you, you may write, at least for me, let me share what I wrote from my top 3 values are integrity, faith, and happiness. Those are my top 3. I have 5. The other 2 are courage and teamwork. I change it sometimes. I put service and teamwork. So identify your top 3 to 5 values that governs your life. Then write a brief identity statement, such as, I am a person who learned, who leads with integrity, who is loved, and who is called to contribute. And you can continue writing more. Because you see, from that place, identity, your identity, you are reminding your mind of your identity. And so from that place, you identify one specific action you will take this week that reflects that statement. So identify 3 to 5 core values, then write a brief statement about it, and then take an action step this week that reflects that statement. It might be scheduling a conversation with a mentor instead of isolating or blocking time out for movement. I tend to do that quite a bit. I started walking, and running. I haven't done that for years. I started walking every day and running every day. And I have to say that I have lost over 30 pounds. I'm so excited. So for you, once you've written, taking some time to write down the identity statement, again, like you said, you might schedule some time with a mentor or a coach, or you might block out time to go move about in nature, or pray instead of working until you're empty. Or maybe for you, decline one request that pulls you further away from your alignment and what you value. Because this is where values move from theory into behavior. It is not about performing business. It is about deciding that your future self would recognize as aligned. I use a tool online which is called T.H.R.E.A.D. And every year for the last, 5 or 10 years, I've been writing a letter to my future self. I write letters that deliver in 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And I'm just so amazed at the things that I have envisioned for my life, and I've seen them come to pass. That's what intentionality means. This work of intentional transformation is not abstract. It is powerful at the level of your brain and your behavior. I want you to know, my friends, that each time you walk through these steps, these 4 steps, you're teaching your nervous system and your mind that you will no longer abandon your inner life, to maintain appearances. You're telling yourself that you are not waiting for circumstances to resolve before you begin to lead differently, to love differently, to live differently. You are using these resources. You're using honest language and repeatable practices to bring your body, your story, your soul, your mind, your heart, your faith, and your values, and everything that makes you the amazing human being that you are back into alignment. And in that aligned space, Think Deeply becomes your first deliberate stitch in reweaving your life with intention. This is what it means to begin to achieve intentional transformation in the middle of disruption. You're not waiting until everything is resolved to live differently. No. I want you to know that you have the power to create a small but steady space in all of who you are. But this space in which your body, your soul, your spirit, your mind, your faith, your values, all of you can come back into the conversation. And in that space, my friends, Think Deeply becomes more than an idea. It becomes the first stitch in reweaving your life with intention. And that's the power that you have. You have the power to change the story you live inside as you walk through it. I am so excited about this journey that we're on together. I am so excited. I've given you, I think, 5 or 6 tools. Go back, replay this episode, grab your worksheet, work through it. I am telling you, this works. It has worked for me many times over. It has not failed me. You got this. I can only imagine how painful your season has been. I can only imagine how you're feeling in this moment. I want you to know you can do all things because God is going to give you the strength to rise again and to rise forward and evolve beyond this disruption. I believe that with all of my heart. As we close this episode, I want to pause and honor what you have just done. You haven't just listened to ideas about thinking deeply. You've entered a challenging scene, recognized the weight of your own disruption, and allowed yourself to respond honestly rather than on autopilot. I'm proud of you because you've considered what it means to bring your whole self, your body, your story, your faith, and your values into the room when life doesn't go as planned. And guess what? If you are living as a human being, you will experience painful moments when you have to make the decision about who you are and how you will allow the situation to shape you into who you're becoming. And so we decided that your disruption is more than just a frustrating inconvenience. It is not the entirety of your life tapestry. It is the knot in the fabric of your life that you can feel, yes, even when your schedule is full. But you have the power to examine how your brain and nervous system react when loss or uncertainty occurs. And you have the power to make the decision to recognize that your default mode network begins to create a story about who you are. And you have the power to drive what that looks like. And so today we walk through 4 practices that I invite you to go back and to take a look at the 4 practices that we shared today. And they are, number 1, name what is happening and where it lived in your body. Separate the facts of what has happened from the story you're telling about your worth. Identify which part of your life this disruption is impacting most. And remember who you are and who you are becoming. And choose one concrete action that aligns with that identity rather than with that in the fear. In our next episode, we will move to the second stage of the T.H.R.E.A.D system, which is to harvest wisdom. We will explore how to gather insight from what you have lived through without collapsing into blame, shame, or regret, and how to begin turning the raw material of this disruption into guidance for your next season of leadership, love, learning, and life. And so, my friends, if this episode resonated with you, I invite you to take one more step. Share it with someone who is walking through their own disruption, maybe a colleague, a friend, a family member, or a leader you care about. I also invite you to subscribe or follow the Achieve Intentional Transformation podcast so you don't miss an episode. If you have a moment, leave a rating or review. Your words help this conversation reach other leaders who need to know they are not alone and that transformation is still possible in the middle of real life. Real life. And so thank you for spending this time with me and, more importantly, with yourself. This is Achieve Intentional Transformation podcast, where we turn disruption into purposeful next steps and reweave our lives with intention, create intentionality. I am Dr. Leonie H. Mattison. Your story is still being written, my friends, and you have more influence over the pattern than you may realize. Until next time, take care. Take care now, my friends.